Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
Hello everyone, welcome back to my lecture. So today we are going to talk about tax incidence, and in tax incidence we are going to talk about tax incidence and also tax revenue, and then how it has the impact on consumer and producers, or who will bear the taxes, like when it is imposed or levied either on the consumer or on the producers. So, and in this particular discussion, we'll also talk about taxation or imposition of taxation in different types of market. Like especially, we'll begin with perfect competitive markets, and then we'll move, and then we'll also show how it happens when we impose the tax in the imperfect market, or monopoly and other markets when we see the demand functions are different, right? So we'll begin with that, and then tax incidence and tax revenue will begin with, especially in context of competitive market. So before moving forward, so let us first again kind of just imagine what we already discussed. This is just to revise, like the elasticity of demand. And in our last discussion, we already spoke about like what is the important role of the elasticity, and we had shown that elasticity of demand or elasticity of supply, this elasticity plays very important role. Means the relationship or the functional relationship, or how price and quantity, these two are related, or how price or impact of the price or changes of the price, how it impacts on the quantity. That is very important when we talk about revenue, tax revenue and tax incidence. So the elasticity of demand gives the percentage changes in the quantity of a good consumed due to percentage changes in its price. So this is what by the definitions. So elasticity of supply indicates the changes in the amount produced in response to a percentage changes in the price. And as we know that supply curve, it shows the it indicates the price and quantity, that how producer decides. So it has the minimum price, or it also includes the cost of production for the producers. So now in competitive markets, tax incidence depends on the elasticity of demand and also on the supply. So inelastic factors bears the tax burden. Elastic factors avoid the taxes. More generally, the final incidence of tax depends on the relative elasticities of demand and supply. So this is just to kind of recap what we already discussed in our last lecture. So elasticities of demand and supply also affect the amount of tax revenue that is raised. So tax revenues are the greater the lower are the elasticities. So this is like trying to show you that the relationship between tax revenue and then elasticities of the commodities, and of course the vice versa. So in competitive market, how it happens when we try to look at effect of commodity taxes levied on the producers. So this is basically the supply side stories. So what happens here, like when tax is imposed on the producers, so as we know that marginal cost is a supply function for the farm. So when tax is imposed on the producers, it gets which curve will get impacted? Supply curve. And which cost will be impacted? It is on the marginal cost. Certainly when tax will be imposed and pass it on to the consumer, so it's basically the price of the product will increase, and then from the producer's point of view, cost, marginal cost will be increased. So if marginal cost increases, then that requires a higher price for each production level, because that's how producers, they are adjusting taxes in the consumption, and the supply curve shifts upward by the amount of the taxes that we'll discuss in a minute. So the increase in the price reduces the quantity consumed, and ultimately tax incidence is shared between the consumer and producers. So this tax will be reflected through the higher price of the commodity, and that's how price will be shared, and higher price will be or can be seen as a burden, and that is due to the tax. So this can be considered as tax burden, and then this will be shared by both the parties, like consumer and supply, or say producers, right? So we'll show how it looks like. Like if price is measured along with the vertical axis and quantity demanded is measured along with the horizontal axis, and say this is demand function, downward sloping, and here if we assume that this is supply curve, and then this is the first equilibrium, say equilibrium point A, and then here is the price, and then here is the quantity, say Q1. So this is what the market conditions, where there is no disequilibrium situations, or there is no shortage or excess supply. So this is the market conditions, and we can see that A is a point where private market efficiency is achieved. So this is what that we are trying to say. So now suppose tax is imposed on producers. This is the case that we have already explained on the top, and then supply curve shifts from S to S1 parallel, and then this amount that we are talking about, so this particular amount, the shift amount, is the tax and can be considered as small t. And then we can see this as like this gap also, like here there is a new equilibrium point, and here this new equilibrium point we can refer as B. At point B it is showing like quantity will be produced less, so Q1, OQ1 to OQ2, and this particular reduction in the consumption of the total commodity, like say quantity Q. So this is basically primarily the reflection of the imposition of the taxes on the producers. So we can see here, so here at point B there are two prices. So at point B, between S and S1 is the taxes, the amount of taxes, and here say P2 and here say P3. So now producers, initially the price that producer and consumer both they agreed in the market is at OP1, which is the equilibrium price, and OQ1 is the optimum quantity of the commodities. And in this particular case we have seen that taxes is imposed on the producers, and then supply curve, which is a reflection of the producers marginal cost curve, and this is what this is how supply curve shifts, and we can see that now consumer is paying more, like at B is basically consumer is paying OP2, so consumer is paying the price which is OP2, which is higher than OP1. OP1 is the market efficient, private market efficient point, and producers is getting or bearing price which is OP3, which is again less than OP1. So this particular the price, especially P2 to P3 amount, the changes, so changes in the price, so this is changes in the price, is divided between consumer and producer. So how much consumer is paying? So here P2 and P3 is getting divided into P1 and P2 plus P1 and P3. So P1 and P2 is shared by consumer. So this is the, and then P1 and P3 is shared by producer. So now let's move to another case of the competitive market where taxes is imposed on the consumer, or tax is levied on consumer. The example that we have given, either on say taxes on the petrol or diesel, or suddenly taxes is imposed on the food in the restaurant, which needs to be borne by the consumer. So it is basically when tax is imposed on the consumer, whether consumer solely bear the cost or bear the burden of tax, or consumer also transfer the tax burden on the producer. So let us see that. So what happens? So tax on the consumer, the demand curve will shift downward by the amount of the tax that we already will show, but then we also know this from our other lectures, when tax is imposed on the commodity, and then how it changes on the demand. So from that particular debate we can again bring it here in case of taxes. So this lowers the quantity consumed and increase the price paid by the consumer. The same effect as a tax levied on the producer, just what we had shown in our previous case where tax was imposed on the producers, but reduces the price received by the producer here. And then the objective is like, again we would like to try to show like the burden, which is who shares the burden, and here clear the burden is shared by consumer and the producer. So let us also discuss this with the graphical illustration. So here say price is measured along with the y-axis, which is vertical, and then is the quantity, which is along with the horizontal axis, and then this is say demand function D1, and this is say supply curve shows the marginal cost curve for the producers, and producers will decide producers behavior actually getting reflected by the supply curve, which actually determine at what level producers will supply or produce the goods and services. So in this particular case, just like in our previous case, here the equilibrium is say A, and this equilibrium A is a perfectly in case of perfect competition, A is a perfect competitive point, because there is no excess supply and excess demand. So we are also getting optimum level of price like OP1, and then optimum level of quantity, which is OQ1. So now the case for like tax is imposed on the commodity, especially tax is imposed on the consumer, and then consumers behavior will get reflected through the demand curve, and then demand curve will go downward sloping and then downward shifted also. So here is the demand curve, which is like D2, and this shift is due to taxes. So we get the new equilibrium point, which is here, not new equilibrium point, but then the point like at equilibrium point A, what is the new price that a consumer is actually seeing, and that is actually P2. So here if we consider point B here, but then we get the new equilibrium point where the new demand curve D2, it is intersecting supply curve, which is S. So where is that? So that point is, say, C, is the point C, where new demand curve D2 is intersecting with S, and we see here, so total overall consumption or demand for quantity Q has reduced from OQ1 to OQ2, and then this is the price, or this is the higher price that consumer is facing is like this one, like say we can consider as P3, and this is due to taxes, like here tax and here tax, and here like one more point, say P4. So now we get multiple points on the price which will be faced by the consumer, and then this is primarily due to taxes, and then tax will be borne by both the parties. So now let us see all the points. So here say we get another one point, point D. So certainly AB equals to CD, and both are equals to the amount of tax that is imposed, and therefore this is exactly demand got shifted by the same amount of tax imposed or levied on the consumer. So now we can see here, like consumer is facing higher price, which is P3, and producers is also facing higher price, which is P4 as compared to P2. So now definitely the price that will be shared between consumer and producers, and that price is the amount of P3 and P4. So we can see like so this will be shared, this is the amount, so this is the amount to be shared. So now here when we are saying that consumer is having more price, because consumer OP3 is certainly higher than OP1. OP1 is the market price. So now when we divide P3 and P4, then the amount like P1, P3 will be shared by the consumer, plus P1 and P4, the amount will be shared by the producers. So P1, P2 will be the tax burden for the consumer, and then P1, P4 will be the burden for the producers. So you can see here, so at point E, so this is the the point of the discussion, like at point B, if market is on the equilibrium point, like at point A, so at point A the producers will be producer could have pay the price which is like just OP2, but in this particular case, due to shift of the demand curve, where consumer is facing more price, and then producer has to produce less amount because of the new equilibrium point. So OP2 will not be the price that that producer will actually to see, because that is what producers willingness to selling point. But then producers has to reduce the production because consumers demand on the particular commodity has reduced, and then that reduction is due to like the amount of the reduction is OQ1 minus OQ2, and therefore in the new equilibrium point, which is at point C, producers are facing the price OP4, and consumer is that they are paying like OP3. So it's basically the market price is now OP3. So now the price difference between at the new equilibrium point, which is P3 and P4, will be borne by consumer and the producers. So I'll stop here, and these are the two references that I have used for this particular lecture. So thank you very much for your attention, and I will see you in my next class.